Hello, and welcome to the fifth grade curriculum preview for science. We're going to talk about Unit 3, Earth Cycles and Systems, which is happening in the third 6 weeks. As always, we want to start off with some key planning documents when we're making our plan for instruction. Today we're going to touch base on the pacing guide, the unit overview, and just talk briefly about the vocabulary that's on the clarifiers. So with the third 6 weeks, one of the biggest challenges is to plan around the two big breaks that we have for Thanksgiving as well as Christmas. So I've got a screenshot of the district calendar on here, and the third 6 weeks starts on November 14th and then ends on January 17th. And so you can see that if you look between the breaks, we kind of have three chunks of time. We have 5 days and then Thanksgiving break. One of those days, November 16th, is devoted for the Science CBA. And then we come back from Thanksgiving break on November 28th, and we have 13 instructional days until Christmas. And then when we come back from Christmas, we have 8 days. So that's something to keep in mind, kind of chunks of time. And let's take a look at the pacing guide and see how those two fit together. So the pacing guide for Unit 3 has a lot on it. So let's kind of break this down. This is the color-coded view, and just to remind you, the blue standards, those represent supporting standards. So anything you see in blue is going to be supporting standard, and many times they come from third or fourth grade, but sometimes the supporting standard can be from fifth grade as well. The red is readiness, so we have one readiness standard this 6 weeks. And then in the green, we have all of the process skills. So the pacing guide is divided up into chunks as well, and this particular unit has 4 different sections of it. And as always, you can use your professional judgment on how you want to organize those or change those, or maybe you have a different bundling that's worked for you. Perfectly fine, but this is a good first step maybe if you're new to the subject or new to the grade level, or just kind of want to see an alternative view. So let's kind of look at our chunks here. We have 5 days basically for the water cycle overall, and we have 8 days for weather and climate, about 5 days to look at the sun, earth, and moon, as well as the position of the planets, and then 10 days with that readiness standard, and then we've bundled that together with 4.8C as a review as well. So if you take a look at this bundling or grouping together, sorry, and you take a look at these, you could see how that might pretty well work if you wanted to stick within that time frame. Again, I would suggest that you look at your CBA as well as your STAR data and see if that's going to give you any additional information to help you know where to linger a little bit longer, or perhaps you need to pre-assess a little bit and decide what your kids have already got down solidly and where you might need to spend a little bit more time. So just a guide to kind of help you. The next view I'd like to do is take a look at our STAR review as a district, or our STAR data as a district from last year. So the next view is going to be the pacing guide, but I'm going to go ahead and put up the results from Birdville ISD for the MET standard and the number of items on each one. So you can see how that was represented last year on STAR. So when we start at 4.8B, that's a supporting standard, and that's where students look at the water cycle and explain the role of the sun. There was one question, so if you take a look here, there was one question on STAR. This one was a dual-coded question, so it was 4.8B, and then it was put together with the process skill 5.2D, which we have in this 6 weeks as a partnering skill. And as a district, our MET standard was 68%. So that can kind of give you an idea of how we did on that particular one when it was put with the process skill, and that was in inferencing. Okay, let's move on to 5.8B. So again, there was one question for 5.8B. It was not dual coded, and we scored 85% on that. 4.8a last year was not tested on STAR, so as you may or may not know, some of the supporting standards are tested some years and some years they're not. So this year they skipped over that one. 5.8a, where we look at the difference between weather and climate, there was one question on that standard. It was also dual coded with 5.2d, which is inferencing, and then we scored 77 for Met Standard on that one. For Order of the Planets, that was also partnered with a process skill, which was developing or drawing a model, so that makes a lot of sense with that one. There was one question, and we got 71% on that. 5.8D was not tested last year. Our one readiness standard for the 6 weeks had one question, and it was also a dual coded question with a model, and we scored 86% on Met Standard for that one. And then wrapping it up, we had 4.8C, and it was not tested. So this just kind of gives you a glance, a little window into how this was represented on STAR last year and how we have done. And this has typically been an area of the reporting category we've been really challenged, and so I'm really pleased with the progress we're making. And you again may want to look at your own campus data to see how maybe where you need to be putting in a little bit extra time, or maybe make sure that that scaffolding is there. Okay, so again, just to kind of wrap up, just a couple of things to keep in mind is the challenges of the planning around the break, but also very important to make sure that you're not too far behind by the time we end the 6 weeks. There might be a little bit of a couple of days that you could move into the 4-6 weeks, but I would try to stick with this general plan if possible. I just wanted to remind you of a document that might be a tool that could be very useful for you. I had a teacher recently remind me that she really enjoyed using this document, so I wanted to tell you where it was. This is one of our planning for learning protocols, and it's for planning a unit. So I find it also very helpful when we're planning out a whole 6 weeks, and I've attached it in Canvas, so if you go back into Canvas, it's right underneath the video. You can also find it on the district website, but just wanted to let you know that that's there. Okay, so let's take a look and see what's new to your 5th graders this year. Over on the right, you'll see the overlying process skills that are partnered with the content standard. So your students will be using and should be using lots of graphic organizers this 6 weeks. They're going to be using lots of models. They're going to be recording and analyzing data. They're going to be making inferences, and they're going to be using tables and charts with that data as well. So one of the new things for your students that they've never talked about before is climate. So we're going to be focusing on the differences, so looking at how they are alike and how they're different between weather and climate. Your students are also going to be connecting the reason for day and night with the Earth's rotation, as well as shadow patterns of the sun with the Earth's rotation on its axis. So that's a brand new concept. They've been looking at those patterns, but they've never connected it with why it's happening. They're also going to be looking at the specific physical characteristics of the sun, earth, and moon. So that'll be something that, of course, when we talk about graphic organizers, we can compare and contrast those in a variety of ways. And then finally, how the sun and the ocean interact in the water cycle. That's the real focus for 5th grade science with the water cycle. You can see I put a little note up on the side to the diagonal that all of these really relate to the sun. So this might be a really nice way to anchor all of the different content areas and content standards that we have this 6 weeks, as by always coming back and relating those to the sun, which is a main source of energy. Which again, if you're continuing to look at spiraling back to the 1st and 2nd 6 weeks, this is a great example of energy and how important it is even when you talk about earth sciences. So I want to just take a moment to talk about the unit overview and some of the functions, and then I also want to hone in on 5.8D for a moment. So on the screen, I have created a couple of screenshots, and these are all from the unit overview. And what I did is I looked to see what information I had in there about 5.8D. I've been looking at that standard this past year when we've had walkthroughs and seen all the wonderful things that are happening in your classrooms, and then also analyzing some CBA data. There's been a couple of things that have come up, so I wanted to let you know that I've shored this up a little bit with some additional resources and clarification. So for 5.8D, and just to remind you, that's where they are going to compare physical characteristics of the sun, earth, and moon. There's a section up here in uh, approaches the classroom use, and that's the section up at the top where it talks about what characteristics should I really be focusing on, because there are so many. There's lots and lots of facts that we can learn about the sun, the earth, and the moon, but where do we really cut that off, and where do we edit that down? So it addresses that up here in the top. When you get ready to plan for your specific lessons, I also just want to remind you that I've got specific detailed notes here for you that hopefully will save you some time, and also make sure that you're using lessons that are going to be the most efficient and the most effective for your students. So case in point, if you are used to using the STEM Scopes Explore, which is a great Explore activity, you might notice that I have a note in here that this would be good to use as an investigation after the Ames earthly comparisons. So even though it's listed first in the resources, that's because I always put STEM scopes first. It's a good idea to read these notes, because earthly comparisons, if we come down here, and this is just the continuation where it says continued on the next page, this is what it says. It's a recommended introductory lesson because it uses a graphic organizer to compare all three, and it also has a list of informational cards. So instead of just giving your kids open-ended, what are some things that we can observe about the sun, earth, and moon, the earthly comparison gives you a good overview, and then the Explorer focuses specifically on the atmosphere and lack of atmosphere between the earth and the moon. So if you only did the Explore activity, you would only really be looking at one particular component of the earth and the moon versus having a holistic. So again, kind of starting more holistically and then going in more specifically. And of course, there's some other activities that you can do as well, but I kind of think those are the two big ones that we can do. So again, just to remind you that these notes are here to really streamline your planning and to give you a good overview and to save you some time and some legwork when you're planning and looking at all the resources that we have. Okay, as we wrap up, I just want to remind you a couple of things about vocabulary and assessment. As always, be sure to check the clarifier for vocabulary lists. So the words that are on here are the official academic vocabulary that you can use perhaps with your interactive word wall. And so just a note about that. After this curriculum preview, if you go back into Canvas, you'll see just to the right of this video is a just-in-time video. It's about 15 minutes long, and it's a review video that I made to summarize and put all together the resources that Dr. Julie Jackson showed us on our district PD day on October 11th. So if you were able to come to that session and see what she had to say, this will serve as a nice review place as well as a source for all of the resources. And if you weren't able to join us, then it'll be a place for you to get a good overview of exactly what is an interactive word wall and how do I get started. So there's a video and then there's a little starting guide that I've put there. So I encourage you to try that this 6 weeks. If you're pressed for time or you're concerned, pressed for time, everyone's pressed for time, but if you're concerned about time and how long that might take, maybe just try the interactive word wall on maybe a standard of concern for you, or one that would lend itself nicely for a graphic organizer that you could represent up on the wall. Just a reminder about assessments that STEM Scopes has an assessment bank. You can get to that from the main homepage right here. It has all the released items. If you're going to make a summative assessment for your students, you'll want to shoot and make sure that you get at least 50% of those dual coded and about 60 to 70% with graphics, including tables and diagrams. And remember, you can always find all the released items from all the way back to 2012 up until last year right here under Standards Unwrapped under each one of the standards. So this 6 weeks, we have lots and lots of abstract concepts for your students, things you can't really observe firsthand. And so I just want to remind you that the more ways we um, expose students to those abstract concepts, the more it'll stick with them. So we want to be sure that we're not spending too much time here. These are things that are very important, but we want to make sure that if we want to reach more than about 30% of our students, or have them only get about 30%, that we make sure that we're down here. And just a note about this, teach others. That's a great way to bring in a performance assessment. Maybe just one question. Have your students, while they're taking their independent summative test, have them come over and demonstrate rotation for you and explain how that affects the day and night cycle. So if you have some questions about how that might look or what might do, just shoot me an email or post a question on the discussion board and we can throw out a couple of ideas. Okay, and then just to wrap up, I just want to say a big thank you to all the teachers that have been jumping into the discussion board, as well as during our District PD Day on October 11th. Those of you that participated in the SOAR in Science Padlet feedback, there's some really great feedback in there. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share out with others. And if anyone would like to go back in there at any time, you can. You just go back through the October 11th portal and you can get back to that Padlet. So thank you for participating in that. And also just want to thank you for participating in the discussion boards. Every 6 weeks, you'll see the same kind of a format for the curriculum previews. There'll be a curriculum preview video, which you're watching now. There's always going to be an option for a discussion, or I'll have a question posted or some sort of interaction where you can ask me a question or ask others a question or share out great ideas, or just hop on there and see what other people are saying and respond to what they've said. So this is really a strong and powerful tool that we'll have to build our community. And then there'll also be just-in-time learning that we'll have for different topics like interactive word walls and some other things that are coming up. And then finally, if you're still in need of some face-to-face time, either with your coordinator or you want to have a time to get together with some colleagues, we have that set up every 6 weeks as well, and it's called C3. This is just an additional optional way for us to support your instruction and your student learning. You can find out more information about that. There's a link to a s'more back in Canvas, and then you can find the dates that those are scheduled every 6 weeks in workshop, and we send out an email blast too. Thank you so much for all that you do, and please let me know how I can help continue to support your instruction, and have a great 6 weeks.